Hey friends, Ryan here. It's so good to be with you again this morning. Today we're continuing on in the book of Philippians, this book of joy, and we come to a new chapter. And yet, I think here in these opening verses, Paul is actually concluding what's just come before. And we find that in Philippians chapter 3. Listen to what we're told. He says, "Finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things to you is no trouble to me and is safe for you." As I was reading Paul's words, it really occurred to me that this call to rejoice is so important, especially in times like these. To rejoice is to choose joy. It's to anchor our lives in the certainty and the promise of God's hope. Now let's talk about what rejoicing isn't. Rejoicing isn't some kind of Jesus Band-Aid, that we put on. It isn't just some nicety where we find hope even though life is falling apart at the seams. It's anchoring our lives in the certain hope of God's truth and faithfulness and power in our lives. As I was thinking about what it looks like to rejoice, I was reminded that as we come into this new month, it's kind of weighing on me because we enter the month of the 1-year anniversary of Tammy's passing. And I've just been reflecting over the last couple days about those final weeks with her. And one of the things that I'm so powerfully reminded of is that in those final days, she chose to rejoice. I remember her telling me one night, we can only feel one emotion at a time. And as for me, I choose joy. In other words, what she was saying is, even though we will feel many things in a moment, the emotion that holds our gaze, the emotion that we focus on, we do have a choice where we will dwell. And her decision was to choose joy. And to be honest, there are many days where I realize she is so much better at that than I was and am. And I watched with stunning clarity and beauty as God used that joy to have a transforming impact on those around us. And I don't know about you. I don't know what it is that you're facing today, but I wonder, what does it look like to rejoice? What does it look like to say to the doubts and the fears, not what if, but anchoring your life on the certainty of the one who is the I am. And please don't get me wrong. I never want to diminish or minimize the heaviness and the weight and the oppression that so many are feeling in this time. I hear you. This is a tough season. But let me encourage you that even in the midst of that toughness, God is faithful and we can find hope. But the second thing I think Paul reminds us of is we need to be reminded of that reality. He says to write these things again to me. It's not a problem for me and it's safe for you. And what that really spoke to me this morning was the powerful reminder that we need to be reminded to rejoice. Rejoicing does not come naturally. In fact, so often we get frustrated because we just don't seem to do it in our own power. And yet one of the incredible gifts that God has given us is the gift of one another. One of the greatest gifts I think that you can give today is to simply come alongside another person and say, I love you, I care for you, and though this is hard, let me encourage you. Look for Jesus, even in the midst of the pain. And though you feel it, though the pain isn't going away, I'll be with you as an expression of his love and his mercy, even in the midst of the storm. What would it look like today, both to come into that place of rejoicing in your own heart and to seek out one to whom you can remind to rejoice? Maybe that's simply sending an email or a note to a close friend. Maybe that's simply wrapping your arms around someone at work that you see is suffering. But friends, I believe one of the most important things that we can do is to recognize the radical responsibility of rejoicing. That God has given us a high and holy calling, that in the midst of the storms and the difficulties of this life, we as a people walk through pain and suffering and loss, and we do it with hope because we rejoice. How? In the Lord, in the faithfulness of Christ, in the one who has promised to fulfill his purposes for us. And so, friends, in whatever it is that you're facing today. May the God of all joy fill and surround you. May he comfort you. May he overwhelm you in his mercy and his love. And may you rejoice at the